All right, so we're gonna start taking the cover off here for the shifter tube replacement. We have excessive play in here, and it's worn out down into this slot right here. So we're gonna, tubes wear on these or they break, and we got some mileage on this truck, so we're gonna change it. And when we get it off, we'll see how much tighter it gets. And we could need a shifter thing here, but I don't think so. Hopefully we'll be able to just change this tube, and this is gonna tighten this all up for us. So we got a 7mm down here. Take off this lower cover down here. We have this latch here for the hood is in the way as well. And we got another one over here. And there's gonna be a second one underneath here that's a little tougher to get at. This one and this one right next to it. Get underneath here. I'm gonna go get a Phillips screwdriver. We're gonna take these two plastic covers off. Yeah, it's just, you gotta get it by feel. There it goes. We can get it off like this. When we loosen up the column, as we're putting it back together, before we do our final tighten for the bolts to go up, we're probably gonna do that so that, put the cover on, so it makes it a little easier for us. So, all right, so now we got some 13mm bolts down here that we have to loosen up to take off. And we had a relay right here that we had to move the last time to get up at one of the bolts. And we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna get our tool to remove this relay here. And then we'll show you the 13mm bolts that we got. A tool here to put the button plugs up here. I'm just gonna get the relay up out of the way. It helps us get to one of the bolts up here. Kind of tight. Some stuff aside. Get our wrench up there. And we got a bolt over here. We got a sister bolt on this side over here that we have to get at. It's right up. Try and get the ratchet on it. So we'll get this one first. Opposite side of it.
So removing these two bolts.
There's gonna be two more up top here that we're gonna get in a very fun spot. This one here has a lot of stuff in the way here. Let's get these other two. I'll do this one last. Easier for me. Can't really move now. So we're gonna take this last one out, and it's gonna drop down, and then we'll really be able to get a good look at the shifter tube. I think this runs around. That's not good. Getting ready to take the shifter. We have this wire right here. This is the overdrive wire that's going up to your shifter. And there's a connector down below here that we're gonna take off. It's just got a little 2-wire connector, and it's tucked in down here. Plus there's some other wires around it. But peel this little thing back here, and it's got a little tab that it's held on by. And I'm trying to tie this little blue and red wires right on my grill here, man. Just not really what I want it to be, but let's see if we can just unplug this now. I get some, it doesn't seem to want. Okay, so get it up now. All these little clips. Now, we find it's going to be better if you unbolt the two screws in the back of the shifter tube here where the spring is, and leave the linkage in there. I'm going to unbolt the shifter tube now. We're going to get this transferred over, the new tube. So I've got some T27 Torx bits to take off. It's part of the shifter tube. This thing just keeps going on and on and on. That should just pull right out. Okay, let's get this one off. And we've got these two here to get off now. And this damn tube should come out. Now we can transfer the parts over on the bench. We got one thing holding this black piece in.
It's like pulling a tooth.
This little orange thing came out. We're gonna hope that we can get this back in there and fix it, because this part comes as part of the overdrive shift hand lever. So we want to reuse that. So we have two new bushings for this, and we've got the new shifter tube. A lot of times these tubes crack. So all the work to go in and do this, we're replacing it while we're in there. So we're gonna take this tube off. There's a pin right here that we're gonna take out, drive this pin out here. And that'll take the shifter linkage out. Bushing, like I said, it's all beat to crap. And of course we didn't get one, so we're gonna try and reuse it and get it in there. Worst case scenario, we can go back in and change this out. So this pin is gonna get driven out the rest of the way, and this bushing went in like this. We're gonna try and get it in and get it bottomed out so that it stays in there tight. And on this end down here, we've got the Torx bits. We're gonna take these off and take this off. We've got another pin that we're gonna drive out here. So let's drive this one out now. We'll leave that in for now. We're gonna take this end off. Let me get the Torx. There's a shaft inside this tube. It's gonna have to get removed. Like I said, a lot of times these screws loosen up, and that's your whole problem. There's a spring under here that's pushing. Then you get the spring and the shaft in here. Take this out, pull our lever, and come up from the top here, lay all our parts out. And then this whole tube is going to come out from the shaft here. This is all greased up, so we're going to get a little more dielectric grease on this, and we're going to slide this into our new shaft in here and make sure this thing's all lubed up.
So what we're doing now is putting a little dielectric grease on the shaft. This is a real common problem with these trucks.
You know, it's not the easiest thing to do, but like I said, on the E350s, the Fords, we used to see the shifter tube break in the middle a lot. This style seems a little heavier, but they used to all break in the middle, and then they would bend this shaft. From the ones we used to tear down, they didn't have a bushing in here like this one has a bushing now. So if you were going to go in and do this job again, I would suggest to get a shaft, this orange rubber piece, the 2 bushing clamps right here. And we also had realized that the indicator didn't work on the vehicle, and we're going to pull the cluster rod tray out to do that after we get the shifter tube back together. So I've got my shifter tube back in, I'm sliding my spring back on here, and I have this rubber piece that's going to slide back into here, and I'm going to put a little grease on that, and we've got to get our pin, comes from the back side on this one in here. Now we had our,
We're putting these 2 screws back in.
yeah, we'll make sure they're tight, tighten them down evenly.
A little extension on this one, past the bracket.
Snug for now, roll it over, lean on this thing to make sure that it's tight. For our linkage that goes back through, and this feels like it had some dielectric grease on it. We're going to put a little on it and then put the shifter back in and such, and then we'll drive the pin back in. I'm hoping this rubber stays in place. If not, if it gets loose again, we can lower the column and pull this out. So like I said, we didn't get this pin. It's lined up there. It's totally lined up.
Make sure it's all the way down.
Pull on the lever, our levers move in here. This is what's going to release it from the park position. We got our 2 screws tight here on the end, and like I said, when we pried the linkage off over here, I think the transmission linkage moved. We're going to have to try and move it back in place to line it back up. Maybe just roll underneath the truck to move the linkage manually. Couldn't really get anything in there to get underneath this thing and pry it off. It was difficult. So I think when I pulled on it, it pulled the linkage. So we'll just reset the linkage back in the park, and that'll, because our ball socket is over here now, we need to draw it back over here to line it up. So we're gonna go get this thing. So now we got the 2 bushings, and this is part of the big reason these 2 bushings went bad. And we roll the bushings on top. So we don't have to grease these or anything. We'll put them in like this. And then the clamps go right around and clamp them down. So everything on this shifter tube is going to be tight now. So we've got the plastic bushings, we've got the orange thing pushed all the way back in. So this seems nice and tight now, and there's no play back and forth. That's what we used to have. So we'll get this back in place and bolt it on, and then we'll line up this shifter linkage. We're going to get our shifter tube going back into place here. Float it down in here, line up our bushings here. Okay. So we got the shifter in, and we're going to the first piece we had to put on was this one here, and this locks in place. So let's get this lock right here, has to fit in that. It's very tight in here. Was not a fun job. So we've got the shifter thing locked in here. Let's get these 2 Torx bits back in place first.
Now we're going to tighten up these bolts. What size are these?
T27. Get these just all snug down. We'll get them all in place, and then we'll tighten them with the plastic there. We're gonna take our wire here, tuck this back down into this sleeve here. And the wire was tucked underneath these 2 things here and tucked down behind this one here. And so we got the tube back in, the shifter thing is down, and we're gonna just put 2 bolts in to hold the top of this thing up in place and loose. We'll just get these 2 in down here, and then we're going to connect the electrical connector back down here.
Putting a couple screws back in the steering column bracket.
So we just plugged in the overdrive switch back into the black connector here. And then this thing was just tied up into this area right here. It slides on this little plastic clip right here and locks it in place. We'll put that back on. And then when you look underneath here, this thing goes on and it pushes onto this screw right here like such, and you tighten the screw down, and then you'll pull the prindle over onto the shifter. Now the shifter is all the way up. We're going to want to move the shifter down.
So for now we're going to connect the end of the loop mechanism.
Okay, now you got it.
Yep, it's showing in neutral.
Okay, all right, and then move the shifter up into park, reverse, neutral, drive, All right, so we got it adjusted properly, and there's a little wheel down here on the bottom, and this is what you can adjust it with, and we have the little tiny, I think that's a 6mm that we're gonna tighten this thing up.
Nice bolt set there. Around the steering column, it just kind of snaps into place. There's a couple bolts underneath. Steve's doing that one. Was it 3 bolts, Steve?
Yeah, 3 Phillips screws, you get the cover tight, and then we put the 2 13mm loose right here and here, just to get the column back up, and we're gonna catch the other 2 that are back here.
Yeah, there's 2 more, so there's 4 total, right?
Yeah.
To hold the column in place?
Yeah, and they kind of seem like,
Yep.
kind of, you're working blind underneath this thing, so feel the stud, it's next to this wire here, so we'll get the nut up there, and we use the wobbly extension for this one to get it going. Put them all back in place, so screws that hold this.
How's that?
That's the old Prindle screw, I ain't worrying about that.
Screw that thing.
Gave me a new one with the new.
Yeah. That was a nice one.
For $60, it sure was.
Give you a half a penny screw. Usually they screw. That's where all the money's at, guys.
Get the first one, and then the second one you're going blind. You can't see.
Hey, Steve, what happens if you don't plug the instrument panel in?
No spare parts, so.
So that's all you need to do this job. Hope you enjoyed it. Good night.